I just want to give a bit of a summary of this very important paper that explains a lot about where we are. So the paper of Frederick, the 1979 paper, it's a historical paper. So it's not offering tools or solutions. It's saying there's been a shift around the 70s from CSR1 to CSR2. And in that paper, Frederick evidences the shift. He defines quite precisely what was CSR1 and what is CSR2 according to him. And he already outlines issues or shortcomings, as he calls them, that reveal, uh, uh, several decades later, today, to be extremely insightful to explain where we are today in terms of CSR. So just to give a quick overview, the idea of CSR1, so CSR as corporate social responsibility, is an old one in Northern American capitalism, and it was rooted on the idea that there was some kind of obligation towards social betterment, and we talked a bit about that with the book of Bowen in 1953. Even though the idea of social betterment is a bit vague, there was this idea that corporations and corporate leaders had to work toward some kind of social betterment. And there was something vague about it, but something deeply rooted in the morality of of the individuals that were in charge, that were making the decisions at the top of corporation. So there's both something more deeply rooted, more genuine, but also more vague about what CSR was historically, and how it could work in practice was left to the discretion of each individual that was making decisions. So the vagueness we talked about already in the very foundational work of Howard Bowen in 1953, because there's a lot of impact and consequences to the actions of managers and executives on societies. Therefore, there's a moral obligation for social betterment. However, this remained extremely vague. And the first one that is still very much a question today is any kind of social betterment by a company. If it costs money, it means that it's diminishing the overall profit of the company. So how should we arbitrate in the trade-off between the economic goal of the corporation, which is to make money and therefore reduce costs to a certain extent, or reduce cost enough so it remains profitable, and this social betterment, which must have a cost and therefore is going to diminish profits. So that was CSR1, corporate social responsibility. But Frederick, as a historian, says in the 70s, there's been a shift toward another kind of CSR that he calls CSR2. But CSR2 is not corporate social responsibility, it's corporate social responsiveness. So there's a new kind of CSR that arises around the early 1970s. And in that new framework, he notices that the emphasis is not so much on the commitment of corporate leaders towards social betterment. It's more a commitment toward a capacity to respond to social pressure. So the implication of CSR2 is that it's not anymore about the moral foundation of the corporate leader, of the decision maker, the executive, the manager. It's about their ability to react to the pressures, the demands that society could formulate. And therefore, it's about how you make yourself somehow of available, or at least able to know what is going to be expected of you, what is going to be demanded, the pressures that are going to arise from society, from not just society through its politician, but also the customers, the clients, the customer representative groups, the unions, all the stakeholders that could put pressure upon you. You need to be able to detect and to a certain extent address. The shortcoming of this shift from corporate social responsibility to corporate social responsiveness, as Frederick says it, is that we still don't know what social betterment is. And in that new framework of CSR2, we assume that to do the right thing, there will be some kind of pressure. But in this assumption, um, it leaves the moral heat, as he says, of the company in itself. So to go back to an example that we talked about with two African American in Starbucks that are in line for the bathroom and that are being mistreated as a reaction of the outrage of that, because it was put on social media. There was a lot of media and social media reaction. Starbucks says, we've heard you. They close for half a day all their stores and they do some kind of racial sensitivity training. So, people are then going to debate, is it enough or not enough? Have they heard or not heard? But what we can say with Frederick is there is a more deeply problematic thing here, is that what if no one had reacted to the mistreatment of these two black men in a Starbucks that day? What if there had not been any social pressure from society on Starbucks in a CSR1 framework under corporate social responsibility? There is an expectation of a certain kind of morality of the corporate leaders, the executives, the managers. And therefore, whether there is social pressure or not, there is an expectation to do the right thing. But then we can debate what is the right thing, but people are expected to do the right thing according to some kind of moral framework. Under the shift towards CSR2, from responsibility to responsiveness, the only expectation is to react, to respond, if there are some pressures that come from society. Therefore, it's not about morality anymore, what your sense of responsibility, of duty. It's not about morality anymore. It's about strategy. Do you answer the pressures that are put upon you? And when Frederick says it puts the moral heat off the corporation, it quite literally means that there's no more moral expectation from corporate leaders, executives, managers, and therefore they can just disconnect from moral expectations because their duty is not to be moral, to do the right thing, to be responsible as individuals, as citizens, as members of society. The expectation is for them to respond to pressures, demands. But if the actors, the stakeholders, are unable to organize in order to pressure the corporation, even if it's the right thing to do, the corporation doesn't have to do it anymore. So CSR2 that we live in today, so we don't live, according to Frederick, in the corporate social responsibility framework anymore. Since the 1970s, we shifted toward CSR2, corporate social responsiveness. It means that now, when we talk about corporation, there's no more explicit value theory. There's no more right and wrong in terms of morality, of ethics, good values and bad values. There is only the right and wrong of the strategic answer. So now the question is is Starbucks closing down and doing racial sensitivity training because of its true core moral values as a corporation and organization and its leader? Or is it only doing it because of the social pressure? So it puts the moral heat off the corporation and onto society to demand the right thing from the corporation, but it absolves the corporation from any kind of responsibility. Its only duty is to be responsive, not to be responsible. And the very, very power of this article of Frederick and why it should be read by any business school students and any manager and executive, and more broadly, it's very, very important paper because it allows us to understand some of the shortcomings in the inability today to truly engage with CSR as corporate social responsibility, because we don't understand that it's not that CSR anymore. It's not CSR1 that dominates today. It's a more strategic, opportunistic approach that is CSR2, corporate social responsiveness.